She's always been an early sleeper. That's how people usually say it, like it's a charming flaw. A personality detail you'd mention at a dinner party if conversation lagged. Oh, Mara. She's out by 10. Every night. I used to say it myself. With a smile. With the quiet pride of someone who believed routine meant stability. 9:30, she'd start yawning. 10 o'clock, the bedroom light clicked off. By the time the house settled into its familiar nighttime noises, the refrigerator cycling, the heat kicking on, my wife was already gone somewhere I couldn't follow. For most of our marriage, I told myself that was healthy. Disciplined. Proof that we had our lives together. I stayed up later. Not because I had to. Because someone had to finish the day. Dishes. Emails. One more episode of something we'd already seen. I liked the quiet, or at least I liked telling people I did. The truth was, quiet felt easier than wondering why I never wanted to go to bed at the same time as my wife. That Tuesday didn't feel important while it was happening. It never does. Life rarely announces the moments that will divide it cleanly into before and after. 2 mugs sat in the sink. A half-empty cereal box stayed open on the counter. The normal archaeology of a shared life. Mara brushed her teeth, set her phone face down on the dresser like she always did, and kissed my cheek. The kiss was soft, efficient, familiar. "Don't stay up too late," she said, already turning toward the bedroom. "I won't," I said. We both knew that was a lie. I watched her disappear down the hall, the bedroom door closing most of the way behind her, a wedge of warm light spilling into the hallway. That light always felt symbolic to me. Like proof that something intimate was happening without me. When her breathing finally slowed into that deep, even rhythm she slipped into so easily, I took my place on the couch with our iPad. The shared one. The harmless one. It lived on the coffee table most days, collecting dust. We used it for recipes sometimes. Streaming, occasionally. It held grocery lists, reminders, the digital debris of a marriage that ran on quiet cooperation. The screen lit my lap with cool blue light. I wasn't reading anything. Just scrolling. Letting my thumb move because stopping meant thinking. At 11:47 p.m., the iPad chimed. Not loud. Not urgent. Just a polite little sound. A banner slid down from the top of the screen. "Jason, you up?" My body reacted before my mind did. Shoulders tightening. Breath catching. Fingers stiffening around the edges of the iPad. It wasn't explicit. It wasn't even inappropriate by itself. But it wasn't for me. Another banner replaced it before the first one even faded. "Jason, I can't stop thinking about last night." That was when my stomach dropped. There's a specific moment when your brain scrambles to protect you. When it throws out explanations like flotation devices, hoping one of them will keep you afloat. Wrong person. Group chat. Work thing. Mara worked with a lot of people. She'd mentioned a Jason once, hadn't she? Or was that Jenna? My mind rifled through the mental filing cabinet of her life, coming up with lint and outdated notes. The iPad chimed again. "Jason, tell me you miss me too." The room felt louder all of a sudden. The refrigerator. The furnace. The blood rushing in my ears. I stared at the top edge of the screen as if the words might rearrange themselves into something harmless if I watched long enough. I didn't touch anything. I didn't open the thread. Those banners were enough. They crawled under my skin, settled somewhere deep, and refused to move. I set the iPad down like it had burned me and stood up too quickly, the room tilting slightly as my thoughts raced ahead of my body. The hallway felt longer than usual. The bedroom door, mostly closed, dark behind it, looked like a decision I wasn't ready to make. Mara slept on her side. Hair fanned across the pillow. Her face calm, untroubled, innocent in the way sleeping people are allowed to be. I watched her chest rise and fall and tried to match my breathing to hers, like I could sink myself back into the life I thought I was living. On the dresser, her phone sat face down. Dark. Silent. Well-behaved. I stood there longer than I should have. Long enough to feel foolish. Long enough to feel like the only person awake in a house built on secrets. Then I went back to the living room. Picked up the iPad again. My finger hovered over the notification center. Somewhere inside me, a voice begged me to stop. To put it down. To pretend this never happened. Another voice, colder, steadier, answered that it already had. I swiped down. There they were. More messages. Stacked. Waiting. I still didn't open the thread. Context felt dangerous. Context could soften things. Context could give me excuses I didn't want. I set the iPad on the coffee table and stared past it, at the blank television screen. My reflection stared back at me, faint and distorted. Slumped shoulders. Wide eyes. Mouth slightly open, like I'd been caught doing something wrong. Sleep never came that night. Morning arrived anyway. Mara moved through the kitchen in socks, hair damp from a shower, humming under her breath. She looked normal. That was the worst part. She poured coffee. Buttered toast. Checked the weather on her phone, face up now, casual, unguarded. You okay? She asked, noticing my silence. Yeah, I said automatically. Just tired. She smiled. Kissed my forehead. The kiss felt identical to every other one she'd given me over the years. That terrified me. After she left for work, the house felt hollow. Too quiet. Like it was waiting for something to happen. I sat at the kitchen table with the iPad in front of me. The messages hadn't stopped. Overnight, more had come in. The iPad, loyal to its settings, delivered them to me with quiet efficiency. At 1:03 a.m. Jason, I told Tessa I'm working late again. At 1:05. Jason, she believes me. She always does. Tessa. A name changes everything. Not a girlfriend. Not a fling. A wife. I pictured her without meaning to. Another kitchen. Another morning routine. Another woman trusting someone who had already decided she didn't deserve the truth. My hands shook as I finally opened the thread. The conversation filled the screen. It wasn't graphic. It didn't need to be. It was intimate in a way that hollowed me out. Pet names. Inside jokes. Memories referenced casually, like they belonged to them. Mara's replies were there too. My wife's voice, but tilted. Sharpened. Familiar, yet wrong. She wrote. I hate how early I fall asleep. I miss you when I'm lying next to him. Him. Me. Something collapsed inside my chest. Anger. Grief. Humiliation. All competing for space. I wanted to confront her immediately. To slam the iPad on the counter. To demand an explanation that would make sense of this new version of my life. I also wanted to disappear. Instead, I closed the iPad. And I did nothing. Because suspicion, I learned that day, has gravity. It pulls you inward. Teaches you to observe. To wait. And once you start waiting, once you start watching, you begin to realize how much can happen right in front of you when you're the only one paying attention. I told myself I was being rational. That's the lie I clung to in the days that followed, that I wasn't spying, wasn't unraveling, wasn't becoming someone I wouldn't recognize later. I was just paying attention. Once you know something is wrong, you start noticing how much of your life has been running on trust alone. How many assumptions you've been coasting on. How much silence you've mistaken for peace. Mara went to bed early every night. That didn't change. What changed was me. I started measuring the evenings in gaps. The space between her brushing her teeth and setting her phone face down. The seconds between the bedroom door closing and the subtle shift in the house when I was alone. Again. I stopped watching TV. Instead, I waited. The iPad stayed on the coffee table, screen dark, like an animal pretending to sleep. I didn't touch it until after 11. Sometimes later. I didn't want to look eager. I don't know who I thought was watching. At 11:38 one night, it chimed. Jason, did today feel as long to you as it did to me? I didn't move. I sat on the couch, hands folded, listening to Mara's breathing through the thin wall. She slept easily. Always had. As if rest were something she deserved by default. The message stayed there, glowing softly. Then another. Jason, I keep replaying the way you looked when you said goodbye. My jaw tightened. I opened the thread. The messages filled in hours I hadn't known were missing. Lunch breaks that lasted too long. Quick walks. Shared complaints about spouses, phrased delicately enough to sound harmless, cruel enough to mean something else entirely. They never called it an affair. They didn't have to. I learned the rhythm of it quickly. Jason messaged late. Always late. After his wife, Tessa, had gone to bed. After Mara was safely beside me, her phone silent on the dresser. That was the part that stayed with me, the choreography of it. The care they took not to overlap with their real lives. Like burglars timing a break-in. During the day, Mara was affectionate in small ways. Texting me reminders. Asking what I wanted for dinner. Complaining about traffic. At night, she disappeared. And the iPad filled in the silence. I started reading everything. Not all at once. That would have been too much. Instead, I rationed it, like medicine I didn't want but needed to take. They talked about work constantly. Same department. Same floor. Different teams, technically. Enough separation to make things deniable. They joked about how careful they were. Jason, we're basically professionals at this now. Mara, don't say that. You'll jinx it. I stared at that line for a long time. The confidence. The ease. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a system. I began to recognize the tells. The way Mara would suddenly start showering at night instead of the morning. The way she'd mention Jason's name casually, like an inoculation. The way she'd fall asleep faster on nights when the iPad lit up more. She slept better after talking to him. That realization hollowed me out. I started keeping notes. Nothing dramatic. Just timestamps. Dates. Screenshots saved quietly to the iPad's photo roll, which synced to iCloud automatically. I didn't plan it that way, it just happened. Technology doing what it does best, remembering things people want forgotten. I told myself it was for clarity. For later. For when I might doubt myself. But the truth was simpler. I was afraid that if I didn't document it, it might disappear. That I'd wake up one morning and convince myself I'd imagined it all. Some nights, Jason didn't message. Those were the worst. On those nights, my mind filled in the gaps with scenes I couldn't verify. Meetings that ran long. Hands brushing in elevators. Smiles held a second too long. When the iPad stayed silent, I checked it anyway. Again and again. Like touching a loose tooth with your tongue. Mara would shift in her sleep, roll toward me, drape an arm across my chest. I'd lie there stiff, staring into the dark, wondering how a person could be in two places at once. One night, I whispered her name. Mara. She didn't wake up. I don't know what I would have said if she had. Underscore 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 underscore. Weeks passed. I stopped sleeping well. I started drinking more coffee. My coworkers asked if I was okay. I said yes. Lying became ambient. Something in the air. Jason became a character in my head. A shadow I carried around. I learned his schedule without meaning to. Learned which days he worked from home. Learned which days Mara stayed late. One afternoon, Mara came home smiling. Good day? I asked. Yeah, she said. Productive. I nodded, already. Knowing. That night, the iPad chimed earlier than usual. Jason, today was hard. Being so close and not touching you. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. I scrolled back. That was when I found the photos. Nothing explicit. Again, it didn't need to be. A picture of Mara's hand on a coffee cup I recognized from our cabinet. A reflection in an elevator mirror, her shoulder, his tie, close enough to imply contact. And one image that stopped me completely. A photo of a hotel key card. No caption. Just the implication. I sat there for a long time after that. Long enough for the screen to dim. I realized then that I wasn't waiting for proof anymore. I had it. What I was waiting for was permission. Permission to stop pretending. Permission to act. But confrontation felt too small for what this had become. This wasn't just about me and her. Jason had a wife. A family, maybe. Kids, possibly. The messages hinted at responsibilities. Complaints about bedtime routines. Soccer practice. Collateral lives. I searched him online. It didn't take long. Public profiles. Company bio. A smiling photo of him and Tessa at some charity event, arms linked, faces bright with belief. I closed the browser. I didn't want to see her too clearly yet. At home, Mara stayed consistent. Loving. Normal. That might have been the most unsettling part, that nothing about her behavior suggested guilt. If anything, she seemed lighter. Energized. As if she were siphoning something from somewhere else and bringing it home with her. One night, as she brushed her teeth, I picked up her phone. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure she could hear it. The screen lit up. Face ID failed. I set it down before she turned around. That was the moment I realized I was no longer in control of this. The secrecy had begun to work. On me, not just her. I didn't want to be the man who snooped through his wife's phone. But I already was the man reading her messages on a shared device while she slept beside me. Lines blur quietly. The breaking point came on a Thursday. Mara told me she had a late meeting. I'll probably be home after 9, she said. I nodded. At 8:42, the iPad chimed. Jason, room's ready. At 8:43. Jason, same place as last time. I didn't breathe. The house felt too still. Like it was holding its breath with me. At 9:17, Mara texted me. Running late. Don't wait up. I didn't reply. I sat at the table, staring at the iPad, watching the timestamps accumulate like evidence in a trial no one knew was happening yet. At 10:56, another message. Jason, I wish we didn't have to go back to pretending. That was it. Something inside me clicked into place, not rage, not sadness, but clarity. I understood then that waiting wasn't protecting me. It was protecting them. I began drafting an email in my head. To HR. To myself. To Jason's wife. I didn't send anything yet. I just planned. Because if there was one thing I'd learned from watching this unfold, it was that patience favors the prepared. And I had been preparing for weeks without even realizing it. The iPad chimed again. This time, I picked it up immediately. I slept better the night I decided what I was going to do. Not well. But better. There's something clarifying about commitment, even when the thing you're committing to will dismantle your life. Once the decision was made, the endless branching possibilities collapsed into a single line forward. Mara came home just after 10 that Thursday. I heard her keys before I saw her, the familiar rattle in the lock that used to mean relief. Now it sounded rehearsed. She stepped inside, dropped her bag by the door, and slipped out of her shoes. Hey, she said softly, like she didn't want to wake something. I was sitting at the kitchen table. The iPad lay face down in front of me. Hey, I said. She glanced at the clock. Sorry. It ran late. I nodded. I figured. She paused. Just a half-second too long. Then she smiled and leaned down to kiss the top of my head. You didn't eat, she said. I wasn't hungry. She went to the sink, rinsed her hands. Normal motions. Comfortable. Like we were still playing our old parts. I watched her carefully now, like a language learner watching a native speaker, trying to catch the tells. She smelled like soap. Not perfume. Not hotel detergent. Soap. That felt intentional. Long meeting? I asked. She shrugged. You know how it is. Deadlines. Yeah, I said. I do. She turned then, really looked at me. Her brow creased slightly. Are you okay? I slid the iPad across the table. I am, I said. But we need to talk. She stared at the device. Didn't touch it. About 10 seconds passed. Long enough for the house to hum around us. Why is the iPad out? She asked finally. Because it's been talking to me, I said. Her face didn't fall apart. That surprised me. No immediate panic. No tears. Just a subtle tightening around the eyes. I don't know what you mean, she said. I turned the screen toward her and tapped once. The messages were already open. Jason's name sat at the top, calm and undeniable. She inhaled sharply, then exhaled through her nose. Sat down slowly. How long? She asked. Long enough, I said. She stared at the screen, then at the wall behind it. I didn't mean for you to find out like this. I nodded. How did you mean for me to find out? She didn't answer. Silence filled the space where excuses usually live. It didn't start like this, she said eventually. It wasn't supposed to. I'd prepared myself for that line. It didn't land the way she probably hoped. Nothing ever does, I said. That doesn't make it accidental. She rubbed her temples. I was lonely. I waited. You were right there, she added quickly. But it felt like we were just coexisting. I thought of the nights she'd fallen asleep early. The mornings she hummed in the kitchen. You never told me that, I said. She looked up. Would it have changed anything? That hurt more than the messages. I guess we'll never know, I said. She reached for the iPad. I pulled it back slightly. No, I said. I need you to listen first. Her hand froze midair. This wasn't just an affair, I continued. It was logistics. Planning. Lying to 2 households. She flinched. He has a wife, I said. Her name is Tessa. That did it. Her composure cracked, just a little. You looked her up, she said. I had to understand the scope, I said. This didn't happen in a vacuum. She shook her head slowly. You don't understand. Then explain it to me, I said. Without minimizing it. She opened her mouth, closed it again. We were careful, she said finally. I almost laughed. That's what scares me, I said. Not that you were reckless. That you were competent. Tears came then. Quiet ones. Controlled. I was going to end it, she said. When? I asked. She hesitated. I nodded. That's what I thought. She wiped her face. What are you going to do? I leaned back in my chair. I already did something, I said. I waited. Her eyes searched mine. For what? For the truth to stop changing, I said. For you to stop pretending this was temporary. She swallowed. And now? Now, I said, I'm going to make sure this doesn't stay contained to me. Her head snapped up. What does that mean? It means HR is getting an email tomorrow, I said calmly. With timestamps. Screenshots. Context. She stood up abruptly. You can't do that. Why not? You'll ruin everything, she said. I met her gaze. You already did. I'm just documenting it. She paced the kitchen. Jason has kids. I watched her carefully. So do consequences. I said. She stopped pacing. You're doing this to hurt us. No, I said. I'm doing this so the truth exists somewhere other than my head. She sank back into her chair. You're not angry, she said quietly. I am, I said. But anger burns out. This needs to last. She didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. Underscore 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 underscore. The email went out at 9:02 a.m. Neutral subject line. Professional language. No insults. No speculation. Just facts. Jason and Mara were suspended pending investigation by noon. Jason's wife contacted me 3 days later. Her message was short. Thank you for telling the truth. I wish it hadn't taken this, but I'm grateful it did. We met once. Briefly. 2 people connected by damage neither of us asked for. Mara moved out the following week. Friends asked questions. I answered selectively. Jason resigned before he could be terminated. The fallout spread quietly. Efficiently. Like iCloud. One night, weeks later, I opened the iPad out of habit. No new messages. No banners. Just silence. For the first time in a long while, the quiet didn't feel like absence. It felt like space. The silence didn't arrive all at once. It came in layers. First, the late-night notifications stopped. No more chiming from the iPad after 11. No soft glow pulling my attention back to the coffee table. I'd catch myself looking anyway, like a reflex I hadn't yet unlearned. Then the house changed. Mara's things disappeared gradually, clothes gone from the closet, toiletries thinning out in the bathroom, her mug missing from the cabinet one morning. Each absence registered like a bruise you don't feel until you touch it. We spoke occasionally. Logistics, mostly. Dividing things. Scheduling movers. The careful, distant language of people dissolving a shared life without splashing. She didn't argue about the divorce. That told me more than any apology could have. The paperwork moved with bureaucratic indifference. Sign here. Initial there. A marriage. Reduced to checkboxes and dates. It was almost insulting how simple it looked on paper. Jason's name surfaced occasionally, usually through other people. He'd lost his job officially, not just resigned. The company cited violations they couldn't ignore once the investigation was complete. He and Tessa separated shortly after. Someone at work mentioned seeing him at a bar near the office, alone, staring into his phone like it might still save him. I didn't ask questions. Mara tried to talk once, really talk. She called late one evening, her voice thin through the phone. I didn't think it would end like this, she said. I leaned against the kitchen counter, listening. It usually doesn't, I said. That's why people risk it. She was quiet for a moment. I miss you, she said. I believed her. I know, I said. But missing isn't the same thing as choosing. She didn't call again. The divorce finalized 6 months later. No courtroom drama. No raised voices. Just a judge who looked tired and a clerk who mispronounced my name. I walked out alone, into a bright afternoon that didn't feel celebratory or tragic. Just neutral. That surprised me. I sold the house. Not out of bitterness. Out of practicality. Too many rooms echoing with habits that no longer belonged to me. I kept the iPad. Not as a souvenir. As a reminder of how quietly things can change. Sometimes people ask me if I regret exposing them. If I ever wish I'd handled it differently. Kept it private. Protected my dignity by staying silent. The truth is, dignity doesn't come from secrecy. It comes from alignment, when what you know, what you feel, and what you do finally stop contradicting each other. I didn't destroy their lives. I removed the insulation. What burned was already burning. Years later, I sleep earlier now. Not because I'm avoiding anything. Because I'm no longer waiting. I've learned that trust isn't about what you don't see. It's about whether the truth survives daylight. And if there's a lesson in all of this, if there has to be one, it's simple and uncomfortable. Most betrayals don't begin with cruelty. They begin with convenience. And they only survive as long as no one is paying attention. This is where the story ends. How was today's story? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and where you're watching from. Like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories.